Hi, and welcome to Common Talk about the Commonwealth. I'm State Senator Jim Welch, and today we're very fortunate to have with us Kirk Jonah, who is a parent and organizer of Jack's Foundation, which is an organization that recently just had a walk in the memory of Jack Jonah, Kirk's son, to raise awareness about substance use and substance abuse disorders and addiction, and to help families as they're struggling and dealing with the issues of addiction and how it impacts not only obviously the person who is addicted, but also the families and the loved ones that are associated with the person who is in the throes of addiction. So I want to welcome Kirk. Kirk, thanks for taking the time to be with us today, and of course sharing your story and the information, and being willing to talk about obviously the challenges that you and your family had faced and have faced and continue to face, and being willing to share your story and share your experiences, to help so many other families that are struggling out there right now. And I did want to start, though, the initial conversation just recently. It was 2 weekends ago, I think.
May 4th.
May 4th, you
Yeah.
had the
Jack's Walk.
Jack's Walk, which was highly successful. I
Yes,
think
it
you
was.
said over 1,000
Well over
people.
1,000 individuals attended.
So could you just talk a little bit about that? What went into it? What
Sure.
was obviously the motivation behind it? And,
Sure.
Well,
first of all, Senator, thank you for having me here, and I really appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about Jack's Walk. So this kind of came sometime around in our thought process around January, February, and the purpose of the walk is to really do three things. The first is to honor those that have passed due to opioid overdose. We wanted to honor those individuals as well as their families. And so what we did for that piece is families were gracious enough to send me pictures of those individuals that they lost. And along the walk, we had, in honor of their name, their picture, their year born, and their year passed. We had this along the walk, and families came in large groups wearing certain colors or pictures of their loved one, and they would do the walk, and they'd come to their particular individual, and they would honor them, and it was very powerful. And so that just kind of came. The second piece of the walk is to educate our young adults and our communities on the opioid crisis. And we got to get in front of these young adults. And so along the walk, we had "Did you know" signs. And it would say, "Did you know in the year 2017, 47,600 people overdosed from opioids, from heroin?" And so we wanted to have that educational piece. And the third piece of the walk is to support those who are fighting the fight every day and are struggling with addiction. So we wanted to honor, we wanted to educate, and we wanted to support. And we had well over 1,000 individuals walk, and it was a very successful day.
I've heard great things, and obviously seen the photos on Facebook and social media.
Sure.
Very, very powerful. Having 1,000 people coming out to, in support and in recognition. But to have a theme like that, how important is that? You talk about many walks and type initiatives, like a walk or a Remembrance Day, and oftentimes it is about remembrance and it's about awareness. But the education piece is so critical. Can you talk a little bit about why you thought that was so important to have as part of the day?
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate to have been invited to speak in front of numerous young adults, middle school, high school. I've done quite a few. And when I speak with these individuals, they don't understand that a decision they make over here by taking a Percocet or Vicodin will lead you down a path to becoming a heroin user. They don't know that. And when I speak with them, I explain to them, and what I do is when I speak, I try to invite the audience into an addict's life from beginning to end. And I try to share with them that decisions that they're making here, even though they're not life-altering or life-affecting, they will lead to a life-altering, life-affecting outcome. So the educational piece is very, very important. And I also want the communities to understand this as well. So the more we can educate, and I just share, I share our story, I share stories of other addicts that have come to me and share with me their stories and how they've gone to recovery. The more we can educate and get in front of these young kids, I just think it's very, very important.
And and I know that we've talked offline, and one of the things we see as legislators, elected officials, public health officials is the power of family members being willing, who have lost loved ones, to be willing to share their stories
Yep.
and really talk about the issue of addiction. And you mentioned the third component of that was the kind of almost a collaboration or
Support.
a support effort with other families that have lost
Yes.
loved ones. And
Yep.
if you could talk a little bit about that. I think I've seen families who are willing to participate in not every family is different, of course.
Yep.
And everyone's level of comfort is different. But the best advocates that I've seen to raise awareness of this are the families and the parents and the grandparents and the siblings. And can you talk about how important that was to see other families willing to come out and support your?
So we had 15 and then 16 if we include Jack. And for me, it helped me as a father who lost his child. It helped my wife and my children, because now we're with other individuals that have experienced the same. And it was a very, very emotional, powerful time, but it helped me, and I hope it helped others as well, to be together, and we talked and we embraced and we discussed, and every one of these kids is a good kid. They're good, nice, and they're all, the pictures we had were all young men. And they're just nice young kids, and this heroin, and the parents are good parents. And this heroin thing was a sliver in their life, an addiction, a sliver in their life. And we got to remember that they're good human beings, good kids, and they were brought up in good homes. And I think that's really important.
It is a challenging, and I think oftentimes one of the most startling things is to see that addiction can happen to anyone at any time.
That's correct.
Any location, any neighborhood, any city or town. The reality is, nobody is immune. No family, no community, no neighborhood is immune to, drug addiction, and especially when we're talking about heroin, because as you said, it could start with a pain reliever, opioid pain reliever, due to a sports injury or something along those lines. In many cases, that's what has happened. Now, if we could just go back a little bit and obviously talk about the journey that brought us to where we are right now. And we talked a little bit about the walk and the remembrance and the education and the healing component. As a parent who has gone through this obviously very difficult process, grieving process, is there any advice that you have for other parents right now that are struggling with this, and oftentimes I'm sure feel very hopeless with the challenges that they're facing with their child or with their loved one?
So what I can do is, I can't really offer advice, but I can say what helped me and what helped our family. And what helped our family is the outpouring of support we received from family members and our friends and our community. And all that helps you get through the day to get through it. And that's what helped us. The other thing that we did is, as a family, we went to a grief counselor. And this individual worked with us as a family. And then from there, we went off on our own individual person. And when I was in my session, I'm trying to figure out, how do I manage and help my children and my wife through this process? And one thing I've learned was, a sibling's grief is different than a mother's grief, and you got to manage it separately. And so that's kind of what I did. And I really encouraged my kids to get back into their active lives of going back to school, going back to their activities, and continuing their goals and dreams. And I also did the same with my wife, encourage her to start doing some things and spending time. So that's really what helped us.
Your support system.
Is that support system. Very, very, for us, it was very, very important. And it helps. It helped us.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you've also, obviously, raising awareness, and I can't emphasize how important it is for us, not only you and I, but us as a community, us as a state, us as a country, to be able to have these conversations and talk about it, to raise awareness.
Sure.
And
Yep.
let those families know, and those people who are struggling with addiction, that the community cares, and the community wants to be involved and be helpful if possible. And these conversations are just one step or one spoke in the wheel, if you will, of a larger effort to erase the stigma around addiction.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, the struggle of the stigma that's attached to addiction and an
Sure.
overdose.
I have to say, when this first happened to our family, I was like, I can't believe this happened to us. Like, it was I felt kind of embarrassed, ashamed at first a little bit. And then I realized, we were good parents, and Jack was a great kid, and we had a great family foundation, and it was an addiction. And as time goes on, you learn more about these things. So I've lost my train of thought on your question.
That's all right. We can go on to.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but talking about the stigma and talking about
The stigma, yeah. So what I do is when I'm out, I'm trying to speak and I'm trying to talk about that. And again, what I'll do is I'll take those individuals that became addicts and I share their story and how they became to be recovered. And it's the same thing. This one individual I talk about was a college football player, had a shoulder injury, started taking a painkiller, and that led him on his journey to becoming a heroin addict. So what he did is he started sniffing painkillers, and he started doing 20 pills a day. And 20 pills a day at $30 a pill adds up. So then from there, he realized heroin, and he started smoking and sniffing heroin. And then from there, he was doing 20 heroin packets a day. And he became very isolated, withdrawn from individuals. And he would go, and then from there, he met a friend, and that friend put a needle in his arm, and then he put a needle in her arm, and that's how they did it the first time. And then he went off to doing it on his own. And he started stealing, robbing stores. He expected people to take care of him, and he was just in a bad way. And he actually overdosed on purpose in a public place so that he would get caught and get the help he needed. And eventually, he got the professional help that he needed, that he's now been clean for 2 years.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear.
So there's hope. It's a difficult path, but there's hope. So in terms of the stigma, I just try to tell our story and just get out there and continue to communicate.
So important, and the more and more people who are able and willing to share their stories, just every day helps knock down that stigma. So, well, that's time for our first segment here. We'll be back in a few moments and continue the discussion. Again, thanks, Kirk, Jonah, for being with us. And for those watching at home, we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Welcome back to Common Talk about the Commonwealth. Today's guest is Kirk Jonah, who is sharing his story, his family story, and a personal story about his son, Jack Jonah, who passed away from an overdose, addiction overdose, within the past couple of years. And Kirk has been sharing his story not only with us on the television show, but with many people throughout the community, and especially I know we've talked a little bit, the powerful impact that you've been able to have as you've had conversations and gone to schools and talked to
Yeah.
students
Thank you.
about
Yeah.
the impacts. Could you share a little bit about some of your experiences there?
Sure. I over time, this speaking has just evolved, and I was asked to speak in front of some kids in school, and I was very fortunate to speak to the West Springfield Middle School and the West Springfield High School. So I think it was about 2,100 children, young adults over 2 days. And so what I'll do is I'll tell our story, the Jack Jonah story, but then I evolve into telling a story about how a great athlete became an addict, and the process this addict went through to become that addict. And I share that with the kids to get to know about decisions that you make over here can get you over here. And so I share that. And then when I finish up, what I'll do is I'll walk out to the audience and I'll say, hey, listen, I'm in West Side. So how many people do you think live in West Springfield? And they'll raise their hand, 18,000, this thousand. And on the screen, I have show up 28,000 and so. I go, how about Agawam? Same process, then the number of Agawam, 28,000. Holyoke, 40,000. Westfield, Chicopee, and we go through the whole thing. And then I'll say, how many people do you think died of opioid overdoses in the United States in 2016? And they'll go, 1,000, depending on the grade. It'll be the numbers lower in the middle school, higher in high school. And then I put up on the screen, that number is 42,000. And they're just like, I go, that's all of your town and half of Agawam gone in 1 year. I go, how many in 2017? And we go back and forth, and the number is 47,600. I said, now that's all of Holyoke gone and more of Agawam. So in 2 years, West Springfield, Agawam, and Holyoke population, that gone. And that's pretty impactful.
Absolutely.
And the last thing I do with them, and then we have questions and answering. And then the last thing I do with them, right before the buzzer, I put up something on the screen. I say, what do you think that is? And a birth certificate. I go, look closer. It's a death certificate. And I go, this is what you get as a parent 6 weeks after you bury your child. I go, look at that. And I have the camera zoom in as to the cause. I go, read it out loud to me. And it says acute heroin intoxication. I make them read it again. Acute heroin intoxication. And I said, you may leave here today and not remember Kirk Jonah or Jack Jonah, but put that picture in your mind. So when you're out and you're faced with a very challenging decision at a party, at an event, and you're questioning whether or not you should make that decision, think about that death certificate. And hopefully that will give you the courage to make the right decision.
And unfortunately, it is sometimes just that first and only the first decision that gets a child or a kid or a young person on. It could be anybody, of course, right? It could be anybody, any age, but on that path.
Let me give you a story of two young men. I tell this to the kids. I go, two young men. They went to their parents' cabinet. Bottles were from CVS. They're right. They're painkillers. Parent had a back surgery. They go to a party. And they're like, hey, it's not stuff from the street. It's from CVS.
Right.
It's okay, right? My parents take it for their back. And what they do is they take them. And, well, one of those individuals became a 14-year heroin addict, and the other one did not. You don't know who you're going to be.
Right.
You don't know. And that's a story I always tell these kids.
And to be able to tell the stories and, again, your commitment to, I don't want to call it this endeavor, I would say this journey, and, is to be, so heavily, I'm so heavily regarded in my eyes. And but to be able to do that, takes a foundation and takes the organization, Jack's Foundation, that you've created. And I know the people at home would love to hear a little bit more about how, that came about, what the ultimate goal is for the foundation. And if people want to get involved and help, we can put a number on the screen or some information on the screen in terms of how people can help as well. But maybe a little time just talking about the
Sure.
foundation.
Yeah. So it's Jack Jonah Foundation. And it's on the website is jackjonahfoundation.com. And so what happens is when you go through something like this, for me, is I wasn't sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And a person came to me and said, Kirk, that's God and Jack coming to you. Open up, embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. And all of a sudden, all these things started coming to me.
Mm.
The walk, the foundation, the speeches, and all that. So we created the Jack Jonah Foundation. It's a IRS approved 501c3 nonprofit, so all donations are tax deductible. And that all came about in December of 2018. And the foundation mission is very similar to what I talked about with the walk. One of the things we want to do is we want to honor those individuals that we have lost in their families.
Mm-hmm.
We want to, second thing is we want to educate. We've got to educate these young adults as much as we can. And the third thing is to help support those who are struggling with the addiction. So the foundation, that's the mission. And we're just going to continue to get out there and do events and get in front of people and constantly communicate those three things.
Well, again, tremendous work that's being done not only here in West Springfield, but all through Western Mass. And one area that, obviously as a parent of two middle school children, and very appreciative of your efforts in the school system as a parent, knowing that, you're sharing your story and your family story and being willing to share that, because the impact that it does have on our kids. And we can't, I can't thank you enough for being willing to do that. But one area that we talk about, obviously, is prevention.
Yes.
And, I know that's obviously a part of your message as well. And can you talk a little bit about, efforts to raise more awareness about prevention,
Yep.
especially amongst
So let me give you an example of what I do with the kids when I met with the young adults in the middle school. I tell them that you have to have the courage to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
You're taught not to tell on your brother or your sister, right, or your friend. And I said, you have to have the courage. If you know somebody is doing something like this, you have to have the courage to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so let me give you an example. I have two brothers. One brother realizes the other brother is doing heroin, calls his mother and father. They go, they didn't believe him.
Mm.
He ain't. If someone called me, I would have done the same thing.
Mm.
And so then they started, they went to Learn to Cope, great organization. And I highly talk about them. And they taught these parents kind of like what could happen, where to go, what to look for. And sure enough, they came home. The bathroom door was locked.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first sign. They kicked it down. There he was, their son overdosed. They had Narcan, and they revived him. And I said to the kids, I said, how do you think that their relationship was when the brother told on the brother? And they all go, oh, not good, not good. I go, it's correct. I go, how do you think the relationship is now? I go, they're best friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're best friends. Because the brother realized that he was doing something he couldn't stop. The other brother saved his life.
Mm.
I go, that's what's important.
Mm.
I said, I got another story. Two people. One didn't say anything.
Mm.
Person died. How do you think that person is handling life today that didn't speak up?
Right.
And they go, not good. I go, that's correct. So which one are you going to be? That's preventative message.
Right. And I think that's a great message for us. And as we're coming down to the end of our segment here, the message we all, no matter what our place is in our community, we all need to have the courage to be able to, one, talk about this issue of opioid addiction, and two, be able to be mature enough to be able to address it and be willing to not only speak about it, but be willing to, as a community, put resources and our efforts into making sure that no more of our young adults fall into substance abuse and heroin addiction. So, Kirk, Jonah, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Senator.
Your message is very powerful, and anything that we can do to help you share your story and your family's story, we will continue to do so. And to those of you watching at home, thank you for tuning in to this special segment of Common Talk about the Commonwealth, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.